In this video, we're going to talk about how to sew a corner. So I'm going to sew down here, down the side edge, turn when I get to the corner, and sew to this fold. Turning is a little bit trickier than you might think because it's really hard to just guide your fabric at a turn. But if you use a technique called a pivot, it actually makes it very easy. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm first going to take my threads and I'm going to tuck them back behind, get them out of my way while I'm sewing, because I never want to sew with my threads out in front because they might sew over them and make a knot. I'm going to line up the top of my fabric here with my needle, and I'm going to do 1/4 inch seam allowance with this, so I'm going to line the edge of my presser foot up with the edge of my fabric. I will sew and back stitch here, so I'm going to go forward 3 stitches. And then I'm going to hold my reverse button as I go back 3 stitches. And then I can go forward 3 more stitches. And my back stitch is complete. Then I'll just sew like normal to the point I want to turn at. So that's my first step of a pivot, is sewing to where you want to turn. So I'm going to sew. And I'm going to stop right here. You can see there's just a little bit of green picking out from under my presser foot, and that's how I know that I'm going to be 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now I'm going to take my hand wheel and I'm going to put my thumb on the top, pull it towards me, kind of this kind of motion, and use that to lower my needle into my fabric. Once it's all the way down in my fabric, I'm going to use my hand to lift up my presser foot behind, and you can see my presser foot lifting up here. I'm using the presser foot lifter on the back of the machine to lift that up. And then I can turn my fabric. So I've done steps 1 of my pivoting, so where I sew to the corner. Step 2, where I use the hand wheel to lower my needle into the fabric. And then step 3 is to lift my presser foot. Step 4 is to turn my fabric, so I'm gonna turn it so that it's the direction I want. And you can see everything kind of pivots around that one point. That's why it's called a pivot. If I didn't have my needle there, my fabric would just come out and be loose, and I would get a hole and a gap and a bunch of loose threads here. So I'm gonna leave my needle in there until I lower my presser foot. Once I have my fabric lined up as I would like, I will do step 5, which is lower my presser foot, and then step 6 is to continue sewing. I'm just going to sew to the edge of this piece of fabric. When I get to the fold here, I'm going to backstitch by holding the reverse button again with my thumb or whatever finger you would like. 1, 2, 3, and then I'm going to go forward 1, 2, 3, and then I'll lift up my presser foot, and I can cut off my threads here on the side. There's a little thread cutter. But this is what my pivot looks like now. So I have a nice 90-degree angle that I created there. There's backstitching at the beginning and at the end.